Okay, so here it is, the 1990s. I was working for Bose at the time, so I was a telemarketer, and they sent us to this motivational, inspirational sales convention, if you will, or it was like more of a seminar. And Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar were the speakers. And I had been listening to Brian Tracy tapes, so I was very excited to meet him. And at the end, I waited in line just to be able to shake his hand and meet him. And the person just before me asked him this question that kind of shocked me. He said to Brian Tracy, "What do you think of Tony Robbins?" I'm like, "What? You're here meeting Brian Tracy. Why would you ask him about Tony Robbins?" And at the moment I was like, dude, how offensive. But at the same time, I kind of understood it because way back then, Brian Tracy, unless you've been listening to his tapes or heard of him, he wasn't like a household name. Yet, Tony Robbins, who was doing his personal power advertisements and infomercials on TV, everyone knew his name. So they were curious about the famous guy. So they asked Brian Tracy, and he responded incredibly professionally, even though I thought the question was like, dude, you're talking to Brian Tracy. Why would you ask him about Tony Robbins? So I get it. And he said something curious. He said, Tony Robbins is a sponge. And I had no idea the impact that would have on me. Hey, Mark and Don, welcome. I didn't have the insight that would impact on me, that perspective, but it was fascinating because later on, you probably heard the story. I know Mark and Don, you did. When I was on stage bombing on my first time in 1992, I remember I had one little laugh, and it was an accident. It was an accident. It was a reaction to me screwing up, saying, shoot. And the audience cracked up because for one split second on stage, I became myself. For 1 second. And I remember walking off stage and this other comedian putting his arm around my shoulder. He said, "Don't worry, man. It's just your first time." And I remember thinking, just my first time? Don't worry? Did you see what I did? I got a laugh. No one told me I could do that. And as I walked off stage, it was amazing that everyone else saw a guy who bombed. And because of listening to those motivational, inspirational tapes, I focused on the one laugh I did get, even though it was by accident. And honestly, if I'm being transparent, it was kind of like an instant addiction. I love the idea that I had this opportunity and somehow, even though by mistake, I could make someone laugh. I could make an audience laugh. So I became a sponge. And why am I in the kitchen? Because that's where the sponges are. That's where I want to be around. I want to be around other people who are hungry and eager to make their own game changers. See, it was that attitude that made it a game changer for me. That I said, I'm going to get every book I can. I'm going to find every mentor I can. And I'm going to figure this out. And that was important. Because whatever challenge you have in your life, whether it's a huge aspiration or maybe it's this personal challenge that you just don't see your way out, be a sponge. Dive back in. Find the people who are where you want to be and be a sponge to them. Because winners think differently. Champions think differently. But if you want to know pole vaulting, you go to a pole vaulting champion. If you want to be a gymnast, you go to a gymnast champion. Like, people think differently, but you got to understand the craft and what it takes. What are the habits that you and I need to have that breakthrough to make it a game changer? So this was really cool, and reflecting on all the game changers in my life, this was a biggie because I was hungry and eager. Now, fast forward to 2001, I had been a professional speaker, been doing stand-up for a while. I lost my spongitude. That's a new one. My spongitude. I got my ego in the way. I thought I was good. I went to Mark Brown as my coach. I thought if he just gave me a few tweaks. Look, if you're just after some, maybe I could just get some tips. That's the wrong attitude. Nobody world class ever had the mindset, if I could just get a tip or two. No, you gotta be a sponge. You gotta be hungry and eager and be willing to make yourself uncomfortable to get comfortable at the new level. In fact, my district speech, level 4 of the 6, was get comfortable. It was just exactly about that, my game changer of being a sponge. But thank God Mark was graceful and charming and encouraged me in the way that I needed to go. I needed to be a sponge all over again. I was at the beginning because I knew that I didn't know. But once ego got in the way and I thought I knew, I slowed down my growth dramatically. But when I met Mark and had the revelation that if you're not coachable, no one can help you. If you're not coachable, there is no cure. No one can help you. So I had to become a sponge again, remembering what it did for me back then. So I try to remind myself now that, if I'm working on Facebook ads, I got to be a sponge to the people who know what they're doing. If I'm working on YouTube, I got to be a sponge to the people who are killing it. So be a sponge. It's that mindset. It's that mindset. And that's probably backwards. Shoot, I forgot to flip it. Well, if I flip it, you can't read it. But be a sponge. That's now for my stage time members. That's now that mantra that I remind them. If they want to get to world class, if they want to be eager, you got to be a sponge. See you tomorrow.